All right, so let's dive into one of humanity's biggest fascinations, time travel. What if you could just hop into a machine and pop out in a totally different era, like explore ancient civilizations or witness the future firsthand?
Yeah, it's a concept that's captivated us for centuries.
Yeah.
From those ancient myths to modern sci-fi blockbusters.
For sure, and today we're going on a deep dive into all the theories and paradoxes and scientific advancements that kind of shape our understanding of time travel. So is it truly impossible or just really hard?
Well, the idea of manipulating time itself, like speeding it up or slowing it down or even reversing it, that's a concept that goes way, way back beyond, modern science.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I read about that. It's really fascinating how some ancient civilizations viewed time as cyclical, a concept
Oh,
that's so different from how we see it today with that linear perspective.
yeah, it really is. Like, think about the Mayans and their crazy, intricate calendars,
Hmm.
all based on these recurring cycles of like creation and destruction. For them, time wasn't a straight line, it was a repeating pattern.
Wait.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if our understanding of time is just like one tiny piece
Yeah.
of a much bigger puzzle?
That's a great point. And it seems like every culture has their own unique interpretation of time. But then, of course, Einstein came along with his theory of relativity, and boom, suddenly our whole understanding of time was flipped on its head.
Yeah, Einstein's work totally changed the game. He showed us that time isn't this absolute thing, but it's relative.
Okay.
It's influenced by gravity and velocity,
Hmm.
and under like really extreme conditions, it can actually slow down. And that's time dilation.
So time dilation isn't just some made-up thing in science fiction. It actually is a real thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've actually seen it in action with atomic clocks that are on spacecraft.
Wow.
They tick a little bit slower than clocks that are here on Earth, just because they're moving at higher speeds and they're experiencing weaker gravity.
Yeah.
So in a way, those astronauts are already time travelers, even though it's like on a super tiny scale.
That's wild. But so if time dilation is a real thing, what does that mean for us here on Earth? Like, could we actually use this phenomenon for stuff like space travel or even medical applications?
That's where things get really, really interesting. Like imagine a future where we could actually manipulate time dilation so we could do interstellar voyages without the astronauts like aging a ton during their trip.
Right.
Or maybe we could even use it to slow down aging itself and make human lifespans way longer. The possibilities are kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's like straight out of a science fiction movie. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves before we start planning our trips to other galaxies. We've got some big challenges to think about. What about traveling to the past? That's when we'd run into all those crazy paradoxes, right?
You're talking about the grandfather paradox,
Mm.
the classic one. It's a puzzle that's been bugging physicists forever. If you could travel back in time and stop your grandparents from ever meeting, would you even exist to be able to go back in time? It creates this impossible loop, right?
Yeah, it'll make your head spin just thinking about it. So does that mean that going back in time and changing the past is totally off the table?
Well, not necessarily. Some physicists have come up with some pretty cool solutions, like the idea of parallel universes. So imagine that any changes you make to the past, they don't actually change your original timeline. They just create a split, like a whole new branch of reality. So you'd be changing a different version of history, not your own.
Parallel universes, now we're talking. Is there any real scientific basis for that, or is it just a cool idea?
It is fascinating, isn't it? It's not just a sci-fi thing. The idea of parallel universes comes from some interpretations of quantum mechanics,
Yeah.
that area of physics that's kind of like magic.
Quantum mechanics, yeah, it seems like that mysterious field of study pops up every time we talk about this really weird stuff like time travel. What is it about quantum mechanics that makes it so relevant to this conversation?
Well, quantum mechanics is all about how matter behaves at the tiniest level, the subatomic level. And the rules that govern that realm are so different from what we see in our everyday world. Things get blurry, uncertain, and just plain bizarre.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example of that quantum weirdness and how it could relate to time travel.
So take quantum entanglement, for example. We see particles that are linked across huge distances, and they influence each other instantly, as if space and time just don't matter. It really challenges our understanding of cause and effect, right? It hints at this deeper connection that we're only starting to understand.
So you're saying that quantum entanglement suggests that maybe time and space are more fluid than we think they are. Could that interconnectedness be the key to figuring out how to manipulate time?
It's a really interesting possibility. And then there's quantum tunneling, where
Yeah.
particles seem to teleport through barriers breaking the normal laws of physics. What if we could apply these concepts to big objects, even people? Could we one day bypass the limits of time and space with some sort of quantum leap?
Now, that is a concept worth exploring. It seems like every time we find a possible way to do time travel, we bump into some mind-blowing concept from quantum mechanics. It's like this field of study holds the secrets to time itself.
It's definitely a field full of possibilities.
Yeah.
But before we get too deep into the quantum realm, there's another popular theory we should talk about.
Wormholes.
Ah, yes, wormholes.
Yeah.
Those theoretical tunnels through space-time that could connect distant points in the universe and maybe even different points in time. It was in that movie Interstellar, right?
Exactly. And the science behind that film was actually developed with the help of Kip Thorne, a really famous physicist. He brought the concept of wormholes to the mainstream and got a lot of sci-fi fans excited about it.
Okay, I'm picturing it like a cosmic shortcut, a tunnel that could let us skip the huge distances between stars or even jump between different eras.
Yeah.
But is there any proof that wormholes actually exist? Sadly, wormholes are still just a theory. Einstein's theory of relativity allows for them, but we've never actually seen one. And even if they do exist, there's the problem of stability. Keeping a wormhole open would probably need something called exotic matter, which has properties we haven't seen anywhere in the universe yet.
So another big hurdle in our quest for time travel. But let's not forget how far we've come in understanding time. From those ancient myths to Einstein's groundbreaking theories to the wild world of quantum mechanics, it's clear we've made a lot of progress.
Absolutely. And remember, scientific progress often happens in small steps. What seems impossible today might be totally normal tomorrow. After all, who would have thought 100 years ago that we'd be carrying around smartphones and launching rockets into space?
Yeah, good point. Humans have a way of doing the unexpected, so while we might not have time machines in our garages just yet, even just exploring these ideas is pushing the boundaries of what we know.
Yeah, and it gets our imaginations going right. It makes us ask really deep questions about what's real and what's not. Is time really a straight line? Or is it something way more complex than we currently understand? And if we could mess with time, what would the ethical implications be? These are questions that keep scientists and philosophers busy.
And they remind us that figuring out time travel is really about trying to understand the universe and our place in it. But before we get too philosophical, let's bring it back to the science for our listeners. We've talked about some pretty mind-blowing stuff, but I'm still curious about the practical side of things. If we were to ever actually build a time machine, what would it look like? What kind of technology would we need?
Well, that's where things get even more speculative. The technology we'd need for time travel is still mostly in the realm of theoretical physics. We're talking about controlling forces and energies that we're just beginning to grasp.
So no DeLorean with a flux capacitor anytime soon.
Probably not, but that doesn't mean it's totally impossible. Science fiction can inspire real-world innovation. Maybe those crazy ideas we see in movies and books will spark some groundbreaking scientific discoveries one day.
I like that positive outlook. It reminds me that even though time travel might seem like pure fantasy, the exploration itself is just as important as actually getting there.
Exactly. And who knows what amazing breakthroughs are waiting for us along the way.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. From those ancient views of time, to Einstein's revolutionary theories, to the mind-bending world of quantum mechanics, we've explored the basics of time travel and all the exciting possibilities it offers.
And we've only just begun. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll dig even deeper into what time travel could mean for us. We'll look at the philosophical dilemmas, the ethical stuff, and the pop culture fascination that comes with this timeless mystery. So get ready, because things are about to get even more interesting.
As we keep going with this time travel thing, it really hits me that it's not just about the science of it all. The physics of actually traveling through time.
Right.
It brings up some pretty big philosophical questions too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If we could actually change the past or see the future, wouldn't that completely change how we think about free will and destiny and cause and effect?
Exactly. Imagine knowing what's going to happen in your life, like a big decision before you even make it.
Right.
Would you still have the freedom to choose differently? Or would knowing the outcome already lock you in? It makes you wonder if we really control our own fate or if everything is already planned out. That's a pretty heavy thought. It's like that old debate about determinism versus free will, right?
Yeah.
Does knowing the future trap us? Or can we still make choices that change things?
Yeah, it's a puzzle that philosophers have been thinking about forever, and time travel just makes it even more complicated. If we can mess with the past or peek into the future, does that mean our choices don't really matter? Or do we still have some say in how things go, even with this whole time thing going on?
That's something philosophers will be arguing about for years to come, I'm sure. But it's not just them, right? Popular culture is full of stories about time travel, from lighthearted adventures to scary warnings about messing with the timeline.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's so interesting to see how different stories play with these ideas, like take Back to the Future, for example.
Yeah.
It's a fun adventure through time, but it also hints at what could go wrong if you change things in the past.
Right.
Marty McFly, trying to make sure he's even born, leads to some pretty funny and unexpected stuff.
And then you have movies like 12 Monkeys, which have a much darker view of time travel. They suggest that even small changes can have huge ripple effects and mess everything up.
Those darker stories are like warnings,
Yeah.
right? Reminding us that if time travel were real, it would be a super powerful tool, and we'd have to be really careful with it.
Yeah.
They force us to think about the ethics of it all. Is it right to mess with something as fundamental as time?
It's interesting that even in made-up stories, there's this idea of fixed points in time. Like certain things are just meant to happen and can't be changed. It suggests that even if we could time travel, there might be limits to how much we can actually change.
That's right. The whole fixed point thing makes you wonder if some events are already set in stone, or if they're like these crucial points that shape how time flows. It makes you think that maybe even with time travel, there are some things we just can't control.
It's kind of like being in a river. You can paddle upstream or downstream, but the current's always going to push you in a certain direction.
I like that analogy. Really captures the idea that even with all the crazy possibilities of time travel, there might be these underlying forces that are steering things.
Makes you think, if we could see into the future, would it be comforting to know what's coming, or would it just make us feel trapped?
That's a question that gets right to the core of what it means to be human. Do we like not knowing what's going to happen? Or do we crave certainty, even if it means giving up some of our free will?
It's like the concept of time travel, even just as a thought experiment, makes us face some of the biggest questions about existence. What is time really is control, just an illusion, and what's our role in all of this?
It definitely does.
Yeah.
And while we may never have all the answers, just thinking about these questions helps us understand ourselves and the universe a little better.
You know, it's fascinating how these huge philosophical questions come from something that seems purely scientific at first glance. Time travel is like a portal, not just through time, but through all these deep thoughts and questions.
Absolutely. It reminds us that science and philosophy go hand in hand. They each help us understand the other. As we try to figure out time travel, we're also trying to figure out what it means to exist.
And that brings us back to those ancient cultures we talked about earlier. Their view of time as a cycle suggests a totally different way of looking at our place in the universe. What if instead of a straight line from past to future, we're actually on this huge interconnected circle?
Wow, that's a wild thought, isn't it? If time really is cyclical, then maybe our whole idea of past, present, and future is wrong. What if they're not separate pieces, but all part of one continuous flow?
That's a deep idea. And if we were to think of time that way, would it change how we approach time travel? Would we still try to go to the past or the future? Or would we realize that those aren't separate places, but just different points on this giant cosmic loop?
It really makes you question everything we think we know. If the past, present, and future are all connected in this endless cycle, then maybe the key to time travel isn't building some fancy machine, but changing how we see things. Instead of a line, maybe time is like a giant web with everything connected.
That's a really thought-provoking idea. It reminds us that even as we try to figure out the science of time travel, we also have to think about the philosophical stuff, how it changes how we understand ourselves and the universe.
For sure.
Yeah.
And those philosophical explorations can be just as tough and rewarding as any scientific experiment.
Speaking of experiments, let's not forget about the scientists out there who are right now pushing the limits of what we know about time. What are some of the most promising areas of research in time travel right now?
Well, one area that's got everyone really excited is the study of closed time-like curves. These are like theoretical pathways through space-time that could maybe allow for time travel. They come from Einstein's theory of general relativity, and they suggest that under certain extreme conditions, space-time could get warped and create loops where time folds back on itself.
So we're talking about places in space-time where cause and effect get all messed up, where things could happen before they cause, leading to some kind of real-life time travel paradox.
Exactly. The math in general relativity allows for these crazy scenarios.
Yeah.
And while they're still mostly theoretical, they give us these glimpses into the possibility of actually changing the fabric of time.
It's amazing to think that stuff that used to be just science fiction is now being seriously considered by physicists. But even if these closed time-like curves exist, using them would probably require technology way beyond what we have now.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
We're talking about messing with gravity on a scale we can barely imagine, let alone control. But hey, remember that science can surprise us. A breakthrough in one area can lead to all sorts of unexpected progress in others. And what seems impossible today might be totally possible tomorrow.
That's an important point. We've seen it happen throughout history. Who knows what incredible scientific stuff is waiting for us in the future? Maybe someday those crazy ideas like closed time-like curves will be as normal to us as smartphones and space travel are now.
It's an exciting thought, and it shows why it's so important to keep exploring and discovering. We got to be open to new ideas, even the ones that sound crazy, because sometimes the most groundbreaking stuff comes from chasing the unknown.
Well said. I think we've covered a ton in this second part of our deep dive. We've gone into the philosophical dilemmas of time travel, the ethics of it all, and even touched on some of the cutting-edge research that's pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
And I bet we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore, so many more questions to think about.
You're right, and that's what makes time travel such an awesome topic. It takes us through science, philosophy, and imagination. It makes us think about big questions about reality, what we can know, and what it means to exist.
It's a journey that, in a way, mirrors our own experience with time. Always exploring the unknown, always trying to understand more.
I love that perspective. And as we keep going on this journey together, let's remember that even if we never figure out how to time travel for real, just thinking about it makes our lives richer and expands our horizons.
Totally.
Yeah.
It reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge, that curiosity that makes us want to understand everything around us, that's the most important journey of all.
Well said. Now I'm excited to get to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll look at how time travel shows up in pop culture and how it shaped our understanding of time itself. It's really amazing how time travel is everywhere in our culture, from those old myths to all the movies we see today.
Yeah.
It seems like we've always been obsessed with the idea of messing with time, going back to the past, or seeing a glimpse of the future.
It really shows how powerful that concept is. It grabs our imagination.
Right.
Time travel stories let us explore those what-if scenarios and think about different realities and wrap our heads around what time even is.
Yeah, and they often kind of reflect the worries and hopes of the time they were made in the early days of sci-fi. Those time travel stories were all about exploration and adventure. It was like they were mirroring the optimism and progress that came with all the scientific discoveries back then.
That's true.
Yeah.
Think about The Time Machine by H.G. Wells.
Right.
It's a story driven by scientific curiosity and that urge to explore the unknown. It reflects that whole spirit of discovery from the late 1800s.
And then as we moved into the 1900s, time travel stories started to get a little darker.
Yeah.
They reflected all the anxieties about war and technology and the possibility of really bad futures.
Exactly. Like 1984 by George Orwell and A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess.
Oh, yeah.
They use time travel to look at the dangers of things like totalitarianism, social control, and how technology can dehumanize us.
But even with those cautionary tales, there were still stories that were more lighthearted and fun about time travel, like the classic Back to the Future trilogy.
Back to the Future.
Yeah,
A perfect example of time travel as a way to tell an adventure story with comedy and a little romance.
Right.
It captured everyone's imagination and showed us that time travel stories could be entertaining and not just doom and gloom about the future.
And we can't forget Doctor Who, a show that's been running for decades and has gone to so many different time periods and alternate realities. It's like a cornerstone of time travel and pop culture.
Doctor Who is really interesting because it uses time travel to explore all sorts of themes, from historical events to social commentary to even philosophical stuff. It shows how flexible the idea of time travel is. You can use it in different genres and tell all kinds of stories.
It's cool how different stories deal with the rules and paradoxes of time travel. Some have strict rules about what you can change, and others are more loosey-goosey, allowing for alternate timelines and butterfly effects.
Yeah, that's true. The rules of time travel in a story are often a way to explore the consequences of our actions and how everything is connected. Do we really have the power to change the past, or are some things just set in stone? These are questions that time travel stories have been dealing with for a long time.
And the answers often depend on what the storytellers believe. Some focus on the dangers of messing with time, while others are more optimistic about creating new realities or fixing past mistakes.
Right. It reminds us that even in fiction, time travel isn't just about moving through time. It's about exploring what it means to be human. how we relate to the past, and what we hope for or fear about the future.
And it makes you think about those big what if questions, right? Like, if you could actually time travel, would you try to change something in the past, even if it meant changing your own life? Or would you just want to watch history unfold from a safe distance?
Those are tough questions that we'd all have to face if time travel ever became real. And maybe that's one of the most interesting things about it. It makes us look at our own values, what we believe about fate and free will, and the responsibility that comes with having that kind of power.
It's like a mirror showing us who we are, what we want, what we're afraid of, and our potential for both good and bad.
That's a really good way to put it. It shows why time travel is such a powerful storytelling tool. It helps us explore what it means to be human, the consequences of our choices, and the huge impact that time has on our lives.
It's been an amazing journey looking at this whole concept of time travel, from the science behind it, to the philosophy, to how it shows up in pop culture. I feel like we've just scratched the surface, but I've learned so much and really gained a new appreciation for how deep and complex this topic is.
I agree. It's been a great conversation. I hope everyone listening has enjoyed going on this deep dive with us. Time travel might just be a theory for now,
Yeah,
but it really captures our imaginations and sparks our curiosity.
absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave everyone with one last thought. Even if we never actually figure out how to time travel, the fact that we're exploring this idea has helped us understand time better, challenged how we see reality, and just made our imaginations run wild. And that's what makes it all worthwhile.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
The quest to understand time travel shows how curious we are as humans. It's that desire to push the boundaries of what we know and that fascination with all the mysteries of the universe. And as we keep exploring this crazy concept, who knows what amazing discoveries and thought-provoking ideas are waiting for us out there.